Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. We just literally got finished doing our group study meet this Saturday morning. It was very good. I just want to give everyone a round of applause for finding the best answers, teaching us how you found the best answer, and for also putting up with me in my constant pop quizzes. Because if everybody knows by now, every question is a learning opportunity. Every response that you see up there is going to be a time for you to learn from it, be able to say, oh, this isn't the best answer because of this, and also identifying key terms and looking at those definitions so that you are able to minus those out, eliminate those, and not go back once you find it. But today, let's go over distinguishing post-traumatic stress disorder and acute stress disorder and how to identify these diagnoses and questions on the MFT national exam. I know sometimes people get strayed by it, like they're sometimes confusing with how the wording is, but I am going to teach you how to identify each of these specific disorders when you are taking your mock exams, as well as when you are trying to work towards strengthening, finding them on the exact actual MFT national exam. So let's get started with some of the core symptoms. And we know that the core symptoms of PTSD are going to be the intrusions, the avoidance, the arousal, and the cognition, right? So we've got some intrusive thoughts. We've got some, at some point in time, we may be having nightmares. We have somebody trying to avoid the event it happened, avoid where the event occurred. They don't want to have any kind of talk about it because it will trigger it. Sometimes you may have those points where you can't really remember certain parts that happened to it because, you've just like, oh, it happened to me. I'm trying my best to avoid even thinking about it, avoid even reminders when it comes to this event. Now, the same symptoms go for acute stress disorder, but the only thing that's different about acute stress disorder is that dissociation has to be required in acute stress disorder as well. So you might see it on the exam and you might not. I didn't have it on mine. I don't think I had PTSD really on mine as much either. But let's just take a look at it. And everybody knows, like with PTSD, there has to be a traumatic event that has occurred, whether if it's like a loss in the family, seeing someone be killed, maybe like something with the weather, hurricane, tornado, those type of things. I'm trying to think of these, like sexual assault, car accident, being stuck on an elevator. I've seen questions where a person being stuck on an elevator has now had some symptoms of PTSD because of that. Trying to think of like any traumatic event that can occur because people view trauma sometimes like what's traumatic to me may not be traumatic to you. So yes, any traumatic event that has occurred, and now you're developing these symptoms that follow with it. But let's take a look at this. When it comes to questions on the test, you always check the time frames. Be sure you know the length of the time frames for PTSD as well as acute stress disorder. And I have them listed here, so there it is. It's in plain sight. Acute stress disorder is going to be within 3 days to 1 month after the trauma has occurred. Symptoms last at least 3 days, but less than 1 month. That's just a fancier way of saying that this is acute stress disorder because it's less than 1 month. Then it's 3 days to that 1 month. If it's over 1 month, then that makes it what? It's going to make it PTSD. Over 1 month after the trauma, symptoms is going to last 1 month or more. Right? And I also take a look at this exam tip that's down there. If the vignette, that scenario, that question, 2 weeks after a car accident, you're probably going to be looking at ASD and not PTSD because 2 weeks is what? That's within that month. It's not over a month. It's within the month. Timing is key. Timing is very important. Pay attention. So like I was saying, pay attention and keep timing in mind when it comes to these responses. So let's take a look at some of these key phrases to look for. And these key phrases, I kind of pulled them from like all over, AATBS, Jerry Grossman, some of the ones that were kind of like constantly repeating themselves with some of the responses. I took those and I kind of like just put these here so that you can see that it's going to be the same across the board no matter what kind of question it is, right? So the client experienced this trauma 10 days ago. You're going to know this ASD because it's not enough time for PTSD. PTSD is 1 month. Don't be straight, stay the course. Client experienced a car accident earlier in the month. Doesn't include days, right? It doesn't include days, doesn't include weeks, it doesn't include a month. It says earlier in the month. ASD. Still not enough time. Stay the course. Don't be straight. Symptoms began 6 weeks ago. Even though they said 6 weeks ago, they could have said a month and a half, whatever the case may be. 6 weeks over a month, it's likely going to be PTSD, right? Client reports nightmares, flashbacks, hypervigilance. This is shooting 2 months ago. Automatically PTSD. Too long. ASD is what? It's less than 1 month. That's 2 months that you see. Client feels disconnected and can't recall parts of the events. Now we got a little bit dissociative going on, right? Some dissociative subtype that's going on. But still, even though that might be ASD, because PTSD may not come with that, still check the time frame just to make sure. It might say, hey, some dissociative stuff, but it may not fit criteria for ASD if it's preceding 2 months. Always check the time frame before you make your best response. Now, let's take a look at some of this exam language, right? And again, I pulled this from all over the AATBS, Jerry Grossman, FSI, whatever the case may be. A military veteran avoiding loud noises, having nightmares, and lashing out at his family, right? That sounds like it's PTSD and everything, right? And then, of course, because it says military veteran, right? PTSD, but always, like I said, check the time frame. Be sure. But if it's a military veteran, I'm leaning towards PTSD more than ASD, right? A survivor of assault who avoids location, has flashbacks, and feels detached, right? Feels detached. So now we could be looking at ASD, right? Depending on the time frame, make sure you look at the time frame. A child who witnessed violence and now has trouble sleeping, hypervigilant, struggles in school. So these are some of the languages for both PTSD and ASD, because remember, the core features are the same. The only difference is the duration and time that the symptoms must last, right? Time and trauma are critical, right? Time and trauma it's critical when it comes to that, when it comes to you making that final response on that exam. Did this involve a trauma, and how long has it lasted? I always ask myself these questions. Go back and read. Was there a shooting? Was there a car accident? Was there sexual assault? Was there a hurricane, tornado? I have seen all different types of questions that includes it, right? Look for a cluster of symptoms. This is the thing. If that vignette is speaking about those clusters of symptoms, hypervigilance, nightmares, trying to avoid things, feeling detached, trouble sleeping, witnessing violence or something at school, you know that that's going to be either PTSD or ASD. Do not choose a response that is talking about having nightmares, flashbacks, hypervigilance. Don't try to match that with a personality disorder. You are going to get it wrong. Those are the cluster of symptoms that are going to stick out to you. They're going to stick out like a sore thumb that says, hey, I'm PTSD or I'm ASD. I'm over here. Don't ignore them. Think also of the functionality. Does the symptoms impair like the work relationship? Sometimes you'll see like the person they'll say like, oh, the client now doesn't go to work, doesn't want to go to work anymore because they're afraid to witness it again, or afraid that it may happen again, or afraid that they may have to walk past a place that it happened at or something like that. And now they're just like, I'm detached. I don't want to be around anybody anymore. Or it may be something like if the hypervigilance is like really bad enough, they don't want to go in crowded places because that's where, the event occurred in the first place. So also think about functionality. It must impair it somewhere, but pay attention to the cluster of symptoms. The cluster of symptoms are going to stick out for PTSD and ASD like a sore thumb. Do not overlook them. Don't bypass them. If you know it's PTSD based on the timing that is in that vignette and the symptoms that come with it, then it's PTSD. If you know that it is ASD because you see that it has not preceded 1 month, you are right. The answer is ASD. Stay the course. Do not stray the course. Let's do some questions. And of course, I got them off ChatGPT. I like them. I'll look through them first, and then I'll be like, okay, ChatGPT, you did a good job. Let me give you a round of applause. So this one says, a 34-year-old woman presents for therapy, 6 weeks. So now we've got a time limit, right? After surviving a violent home invasion, right? Automatically, we're just like, oh, okay, well, I know which one this is. She reports persistent nightmares, avoids staying at home alone, and becomes highly anxious when she hears sudden noises and sounds. She also says she's been feeling emotionally numb. She has trouble concentrating at work, and she started drinking nightly to calm her nerves. What is the most likely diagnosis? And let's work these responses together. A says generalized anxiety disorder. I see some words. I see how they did that. They put that in there because it says that she's highly anxious, but she's also got a lot of other symptoms going on, such as those cluster of symptoms that I was just talking about. B says major depressive disorder. I think we've seen it now. I think is it anything mentioned in there about her feeling a certain type of way? Well, she's been drinking because she's been trying to calm her nerves or whatever, and she doesn't like to be staying at home alone. So yeah, automatically we're gonna just throw out major depressive disorder. Not enough information in there to say she has major depressive disorder. D says acute stress disorder. Here it is. Here's the kicker right here, right? So when we look at C and we look at D, C says 6 weeks. 6 weeks. There's 4 weeks in a month. And then there's an additional 2 weeks, which means a month and a half that she's been experiencing these symptoms. Automatically telling us that it's post-traumatic stress disorder and not acute stress disorder, because acute stress disorder lasts how long? Less than 1 month, not more than a month. Makes sense? Hoping so. All right, ChatGPT again. I give you a round of applause. This one was a good one. A 12-year-old boy witnessed his father being shot during a robbery 3 months ago. Since then, he becomes withdrawn. He refuses to sleep alone. He startles very easily and reports frequent flashbacks when seeing men who resembles the attacker. His mother reports he no longer wants to play with friends and avoids going near the store where the shooting happened. What is the most appropriate initial treatment focus? So now, if we take a look and go back, what would we diagnose this 12-year-old boy with, right? How long had it been since he saw the robbery or the robbery? It's been 3 months, so we're not going to go with ASD. We're going to go with post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD is what he is diagnosed with. So now we need to know what is the appropriate initial treatment focus that we should have with him. A says explore underlying family dynamics and attachment. Well, why are we exploring that? What sense does that make? When it's clear this kid's got some PTSD going on, right? In this initial treatment focus, right? B says refer for a medical evaluation. Well, why are we referring for a medical evaluation? He has PTSD. There's nothing in us telling us that he's got something physical that's going on that we need to refer him, right? So no. C says establish safety and begin trauma-informed psychoeducation. I like how that one sounds, but then let's take a look at D2. Encourage emotional expression through play therapy alone. Well, why are we doing emotional expression, right? When we don't even know if he's ready to even discuss it, right? We have to also pay attention and keep in mind that he's 12 years old and he's still afraid. Sometimes he may not feel safe enough to even talk about it yet. So the first thing we need to do is we got to establish safety first, and then we can work on some of the trauma-informed psychoeducation with him. But before we got to make sure that he's ready to talk about it, ready to even discuss it in the first place, right? We just can't encourage the emotional expression through play therapy like he just suffered a huge traumatic event that occurred. That's why C is the best answer, right? Establish safety first, and then we can talk about some trauma-informed education with him, okay? I hope that makes sense to you all. Alrighty, and then, okay, got another ChatGPT question, okay. A combat veteran presents with insomnia, irritability, and difficulty concentrating. He denies feeling depressed, but describes reliving traumatic events like they're happening all over again. So now he's like reliving these experiences, right? He refuses to attend social events because he's easily startled. So now we got some hypervigilance that's going on, right? These symptoms have been present for 2 months. So automatically here, we're going to say it's PTSD, right? 2 months, PTSD. Which symptom cluster is most central to a PTSD diagnosis in this case? Is it going to be the mood disturbance and intrusive thoughts? Can be, might be. B says avoidance and hyperarousal, or hallucinations and detachment, or is it anxiety and substance use? So let's see. I don't remember them saying anything about substance use in this vignette. So we're going to automatically just say D's out, right? I don't remember it saying anything. He denies feeling depressed but describes reliving traumatic events. Nothing about hallucinations and detachment. So we're automatically going to get rid of C. And then it says a mood disturbance and intrusive thoughts. So let's look at this again. So do we have some mood here? Irritability, difficulty concentrating, feeling depressed, describe reliving events, refuses to attend social events. Nothing about intrusive thoughts are mentioned there. So one of the most central diagnoses in this case is going to be his avoidance and hyperarousal, because now he's refusing to attend social events and he's easily startled. That's that hypervigilant. That's that hyperarousal where it's like any loud noise, any sound, anything that's going on around you when you're out in public or whatever is going to cause you to avoid to go there in the first place. So that is going to be the most central to the PTSD diagnosis for this comeback veteran. I hope that makes sense. Let's do this one. A 29-year-old client comes to therapy 5 days after surviving a multi-car highway accident. It's pretty severe, right? Where 2 people died. She reports difficulty sleeping, hypervigilance, intrusive images of the crash, and a sense that the world no longer feels real. She's avoided driving and says that sometimes she feels outside of herself. So now let's take a look at this. It says 5 days. It's just 5 days after the event. So automatically we're going to get rid of A. C says panic disorder. In order to be diagnosed with a panic disorder, we have to hear something about a panic attack, impending doom, feeling like you're going to die, and then you also have that fear that another panic attack is going to come, automatically leaving C out of their answer, right? D says adjustment disorder with anxiety. We would have to have an identifiable stressor, which we do. We may have one. But then also there's an emotional and there's a behavioral response to the identifier stressor, right? And then it's more like 3 days to 3 months. So we've got some time there, but still nothing sticks out like acute stress disorder, because acute stress disorder comes with the same symptoms of PTSD, but also she feels like she's detached, right? And she thinks she's outside of herself. That's that disassociation part that comes with ASD, right? Leaving us having B to be the correct answer, acute stress disorder. I'm hoping I'm making sense. All right, last one, everybody. Last one. 42-year-old school teacher witnessed a student suffer a life-threatening seizure in class 10 days ago. So now we're looking at what? ASD, not PTSD, because it's less than 1 month. Since then, she's feeling numb, disconnected, flashbacks, avoids entering the classroom, difficulty concentrating, and she's unsure when she'll be able to return back to work. Which of the following symptoms is most indicative of acute stress disorder, right? Is it the difficulty concentrating in work avoidance? Could be, right? But then again, that also comes with PTSD, right? That also comes with PTSD. So we have to have the most indicative of acute stress disorder. B says disassociation and intrusive flashbacks. Let's come back to that one. C says feeling of sadness and helplessness. We automatically know C is out because why? That sounds more like some depression that's going on, right? D says some sleep disruption and low motivation. Now, that can happen, but low motivation and stuff is it's not really like one of the major most indicative of acute stress disorder like B is. That's that disassociation, those intrusive flashbacks that come with the ASD. Because we know it's ASD because it's 10 days ago and not more than 1 month ago, right? Leaving us with B being the best answer, disassociation and intrusive flashbacks. I hope I was able to explain this in full so that you are now able to understand and be able to recognize how to answer post-traumatic stress disorder and acute stress disorder when it comes to your mock exam, so that you can strengthen the way you're looking at it when it comes to the actual exam. If you have any questions, like always, leave a comment, let me know. If you have any suggestions as another diagnosis that you want me to kind of like do verses for, let me know as well, and I will also do that for you. Alrighty, I will see you all later. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.